Welcome, everybody. I'm hoping you can hear me. Welcome to our webinar on the power of bringing people together. My name is Lindsay Brummett and I'm hosting today, and I've got a fabulous lineup of speakers for you. So you'll hear a little bit from me and a bit of an introduction, and then I'll be passing over to Professor Dominic Abrams, who's from the University of Kent. He's going to cheer us all up, he told me, with the state of the nation and stuff we've got today. We'll also be hearing from Dr. Jenny Vine, who's from Belong and is behind the report that we're talking about today. And we'll hear from Helena from the London Borough of Bromley about their experience of running big lunches and bringing people together. And also from the lovely Nadia Spears Robinson about her big lunch and experience with the Hearth Network. We'll have a Q&A at the end, so please do drop questions into the Q&A. And if you have any technical problems, get in touch with Kate Groves. I think that's okay, isn't it, Kate? Please nod for me if you've got any questions. But hopefully we can get started. And I hope you also took us seriously and brought your lunch, because this is a lunchtime webinar and we're all about the big lunch. I won't be eating, you'll be pleased to know, because that won't be nice to watch. But you're all welcome to share your lunch over the course of the webinar, but you don't have to share it with anyone on the webinar, which is one of the joys of dialing into something. So welcome today. Why are we doing this webinar? So just a little bit of history. Back in 2009, the Eden Project came up with the idea that we should invite people across the nation to sit down, have lunch with their neighbours and just see what would happen. No particular agenda, knowing that when people come together, good things tend to follow. Roll forward a year and the National Lottery came in and started funding us to do the Big Lunch, which was the start of the Big Lunch really growing and growing. And it's grown a lot since then and had a lot of support from the National Lottery over many years. And between 2010 and 2023, the National Lottery funded the Big Lunch and a wider programme of activities that we created in about 2013 and broadened the programme out. And when we got to the end of 2023, we wanted to understand what does that mean? What does long-term funding in something like this that brings people together to share food, to share friendship and have fun in their communities, what kind of impact does that have? And what is the benefit of having the sustained support that we had very thankfully from the National Lottery to do that? So we commissioned the Belong network to have a look at all of the many reams and reams of research that we've done over the years and to pull together a report to look at the impact and legacy of that period of years working with communities as the Eden Project. And if any of you haven't been to the Eden Project, our mission is to demonstrate and inspire positive action for the planet. And the reason that we work with communities is because we know that when people come together, they can make a real difference where they live. So whether you've got these big, hairy challenges out there, climate emergency, poverty, food insecurity, those problems are global, but our experience of those is local. The pandemic was the perfect example of that. We had this global situation, but we were all rooted in our communities all of a sudden. And how we respond to those kinds of crises in our communities is critical to understanding how we can survive and thrive, how we find the solutions to what happens next. So through the work that we do as the Eden Project, we're trying to build social capital for our collective future. And it's really important as part of that planetary action. And we know how important it is for us to connect with one another as part of our physical, mental and social health. So something like the Big Lunch, which is just a good time in your community with your neighbours, actually has a really powerful role to play in terms of connecting people, in terms of reducing loneliness, but also in giving people that sense of agency and connectedness that means that they can deal with the challenges that might be coming. And we have a strong belief at the Eden Project that in the power of community to help shape that positive future for both people and the people that live around them and the planet. So that's a bit about why we do the work that we do. We've got a little toolkit in our community's armoury, and that is what the Belong network researched for us, looking across the years. So we started with the Big Lunch, just a simple invitation to the nation, bringing people together on the first weekend of June every year, and that is still going and now funded by the Pears Foundation. So you can pop that date in your diary now or later. 5th to the 8th of June 2026 we'll be back, and that is also part of a wider initiative which we started during the pandemic with a lot of other organisations who were hosting community events through the month of June, which is the month of community. So that's everything from Neighbourhood Watch Week, Carers Week, Volunteers Week, the Great Get Together, to things like Refugee Week, Loneliness Awareness Week. And there's lots of awareness weeks and initiatives running throughout June that the Big Lunch sits alongside and collaborates with. And also, once we'd done the Big Lunch for a few years, we found people wanted to work out what else they could do, how they could do a little bit more in their communities. And so we came up with a broader campaign looking at doing community camps and skills building for people in communities, and for connecting people up with one another across our network. So when Belong came in, they looked at all of the summary across all of those bits of work and have done a really incredible report for us. And I think what that report shows is that over the 15 years of lottery funding that we were incredibly lucky to have, the Big Lunch proved to be incredibly adaptable and flexible, and it's used by a really diverse range of communities across the UK. It supports connection, it kept going through the COVID pandemic, and it's marked some really major national moments such as the Jubilee and the coronation. And I think it's helped, lots of communities to come together. So we've had over 1.5 million Big Lunch events since the lottery first started funding it. And I think, why is that important today, and we'll hear more of that in a second from Dominic, is the challenges that we face just seem to increase. So the fabric of communities is always under threat. We're seeing increasing polarisation, we're seeing loneliness and social isolation on the rise, and they haven't returned to pre-pandemic levels. So I think things like the Big Lunch, whilst they're a really light touch way of bringing people together, are really, really important in terms of how we can help support our communities and give them something to look forward to when times are actually quite challenging. And how do you get people to connect over points of difference with their neighbours and in their communities? And the Big Lunch and some of the other work that we offer helps us to do that. In terms of what you'll get from this webinar, what we're hoping you will be able to take away is a bit of an understanding about some of the current challenges facing communities. You'll get a chance with Jenny to explore the findings from Belong's evaluation of the work that we've done, but also to understand how things like the Big Lunch can really help strengthen that social glue that binds people and communities together, from some real life examples from Bromley Council and from Nadia. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dominic, who doesn't have any slides. So we'll take those slides down. You'll be able to see Dominic in full Technicolor glory. So over to you, Dominic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lindsay. And thanks, I should say, to Jenny Vine, Marion Overson, James Williams and Eve Henley for inviting me to provide the foreword for this tremendously impressive report on the evaluation of the Eden Project's Big Lunch, community camps and related initiatives. It's also been my pleasure to work with Belong for many years and be part of its mission to support others to build social cohesion. So rather than preempt what you're going to hear about the report and its findings, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to consider the question of why the work is so important, why the evaluation work is so important. Let me start with the bad news, though. Trigger warning, this bit's not good. If you're already feeling depressed, well, be reassured, there's better news ahead. I think I'm just going to put in the chat a latest report, if I haven't already, from Ipsos, which gives us a really good sense of the misery that we're facing. So we appear to be in a state of inexorable decline. If you watch the news, scan social media, attend eye-catching events, or follow public opinion polls, you readily discover the following. Everything's broken: the health service, the prison service, the police service, the education system, universities, the water companies, immigration. Okay, I could go on. People are turning their backs on conventional politics. They're gravitating towards reform on the right, the Green Party on the left, and there seems to be a bit of a vacuum in the centre. There's a loss of optimism and confidence that our governing institutions are capable of dealing with the challenges that face them. So wrapped up and central to all this is a breakdown in trust in those institutions and their leading actors. And so people focus increasingly on simple solutions, eliminating surface problems, stop the boats, for example, without so much thought about the evidence for the underlying causes or what it would take to really resolve them. So the latest opinion polls from Ipsos, which I put in the chat there, shows that divisions are growing in the population, perhaps intergenerational ones more than others. And even if average opinions are not shifting strongly, the strength of divides in perceptions, particularly amongst older and reform voters compared with everybody else, seems to be accelerating. So it might be worth reflecting on what might be driving people's perceptions, their fears, their suspicions, but also more generally, what it is that they're seeking in their lives. In my field, which is social psychology, there's a great deal of research actually on human motivation, and broadly speaking, it highlights the following key aspects. People certainly want control. They want to be respected. They want to be able to make sense of what's happening around them, have a sense of meaning, and of course they want a sense of belonging. But beyond these motives is also what the distinguished Professor Arieh Kruglanski calls the quest for significance, or to put it another way, the sense that what we do and who we are matters. Now, I would argue that underlying all of the social divisions and conflicts and form of discrimination that we're seeing made so salient by news and social media, we can also find roots in those motivations. Consider for the moment the actions of a leader of the world's most powerful country. Why is winning a prize so important? Why is building golden monuments such a priority? Or why, if one is already a billionaire, does increasing one's personal income to be enough to feed many entire nations become such a necessary goal? An answer might be that in the bubble in which these people operate, where others are both spectators but also competitors who cannot be trusted, gaining significance involves an upward spiral of self-aggrandizement. And you could argue that there's a sort of deep moral sickness underlying all of this. But let's look in the other direction. These same motivations, these same needs for belonging, respect, meaning, control, and attaining mattering to others and self, are the very things that drive people to be kind, generous, thoughtful, caring, and to respond energetically to help others in emergencies. We see examples of this everywhere. So following the Southport stabbings and the riots, local communities there and elsewhere typically come together to reassert their rejection of hatred and to reinforce their humanitarian commitment to one another. When there are sudden threats or events like the stabbings on the train or a flood or something like that, we invariably witness acts of altruistic heroism between strangers. And in response to longer term challenges, such as the inadequacy of welfare benefits or people in extreme poverty or distress, we see people everywhere volunteering their time and resources in schemes such as food banks, shelters, and so forth. And we also know that by highlighting community belonging, we can successfully get people to engage in more environmentally friendly actions if they think it's a shared environment and it's shared with other people in a community to which they belong. They will change their behavior and we can improve air quality. So there's plenty of research evidence that shows that there are good directions to go in here. If human motivation can push us in these many different directions, the question is whether and how we design society to bring out the very best. And I know that for many of us, building the infrastructure, the habits and the expectations that form the basis of social cohesion is a key part of this solution. Unfortunately, governments tend to have a rather poor understanding of what you might call productive work. The informal work provided through volunteering within family caring, friendship support and so forth is, I believe, a fundamental part of our economy. If we want growth, we need to factor in the value of that work and invest in it in the same way that we might invest in other forms of infrastructure. It's not just the presence of jobs that enables to contribute, but also the presence of opportunities, skills, and recognition of the value of their contribution. We know that social cohesion fosters volunteering, and we also know that volunteering helps to build social cohesion. This is a tremendous virtuous circle. To persuade national and local governments to invest in cohesion, we have to demonstrate why it's so crucial, both to growth and sustainability. And that's why the evaluation of the Eden Project's fantastic work, demonstrating that return on investment, is so crucial. Bringing people together, creating new relationships and commitments, bridging divides, establishing new connections that are sustained and build a shared vision. are fundamental to having a strong, stable and caring society that can flourish economically and socially. And what you're going to hear about next is a brilliantly powerful exposition of the ways this can be achieved. And so I'm very delighted to have introduced this project and this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. That was great. And we'll pass over now to Jenny, who's going to talk through the report itself and the work that Belong did to analyse the impact that the Big Lunch and the associated project has had over time. Over to you, Jenny.
Thanks very much, Lindsay, and to Dom for giving those great introductions. So this short presentation, and it will only be short, about 5 minutes long, is based on the much longer report. There's an executive summary. You can find it. You can go to all the detail in there if you like. But I want to just bring out some of the main headlines. If you can just move on to the next one, next slide. So I'm just going to say briefly why Belong had something valuable to give to this evaluation and the academic experience and practical experience and policy experience that we're able to draw on. Noting some of the key findings, which are very impressive. You have to wait a moment for those. And then just an overview of the different phases of the Big Lunch and associated programmes. And then very briefly, some of the recommendations that have come out of that. So moving on. And so Belong is committed to doing all sorts of different things that build social cohesion. So that's working with local authorities, it's working with government, it's working with community groups, it's doing research, it's bringing out tools like we've just launched a social value estimator tool for anyone who's organising any events. That's something you might want to go to. We created a huge buzz in the room when we launched it a couple of weeks ago. But importantly, our research tells us that more socially connected, cohesive local areas bring individual and community level benefits. So resilience, like through COVID, if you had your links with your network built up because you've done Big Lunches before, you had those networks in place when suddenly doors became closed. Higher levels of individual subjective well-being. I'm going to go a little bit more into that because that joins some of the recommendations. Huge benefits to people just getting out, and even if it's just once a year, those links usually can carry on. Increased levels of volunteering. Don was talking about the virtuous circle between more volunteering means you care more for your neighbourhood, means you've got more social cohesion. More social cohesion means you're more likely to want to give something to the neighbourhood. And so it is a virtuous circle, as he mentioned. Active social engagement, because it's not only talking to people who turn up to the event and share the food. It's also maybe you've got better links to the council, maybe you've got better links to the health authority, maybe you've got better links to the police if you've got some antisocial behaviour going on. And importantly, more extensive participation, and that leads to that greater care for the environment. So moving on. Some of the key findings, some really impressive figures here. And we had the job of looking at 15 years worth of reports. There was a lot to look at, and we couldn't do justice to all the detail in all those 15 years worth of reports, but we were able to pull out some fantastic examples of work, but also to look at the big picture. So this is some of the big picture findings. 109 million Big Lunch participants, over 1.4 million Big Lunch events across the UK. Huge numbers. This has affected a vast percentage of our population. On average, £11 million was raised for good causes. This was brought in as a later phase where Big Lunches could then add on different aspects to what they were doing. £11 million for good causes between 2015 and 2024. Enormous sums of money. And that's each year. That's not cumulative. And since 2013, over 2,000 participants have attended one of the 28 community camps, or in COVID times, they turned to online courses. And from that, lots of people have gained their skills, gained their confidence, and become local community leaders. And it's those community leaders that are so important in this day and age, because people need role models. They need to think as Don was mentioning, their lives are significant. So how do you find significance in this world where so much is thrown at us through TV screens? Well, if we're lucky, we can find it because we can feel part of our neighbourhood, and the Big Lunch and the associated programmes is part of that. And then we get down to sort of value for money. So for every £1 invested by the Lottery Fund since 2010 right through to 2014, £13 was generated in fundraising for good causes. So that's just pure monetary value. But then you add in the cost of the event. When you've got that many events and you've got a small central team making it all happen, 6p is the value per attendee, and per event £4.95. Now that's value for money. And then if you look at the impacts on savings to services, because people are less lonely, there's lots of other things we could look at: antisocial behaviour, we could look at ways of the environment being improved, but just to look at loneliness, that's 10p worth of value of spending for enormous amount of turnaround in value, because volunteering adds value to their communities at 2.6 billion annually through the numbers involved in the Big Lunch. So those are impressive figures. Some people like that big picture. Other people, it's great that we've got examples from some of the places that run the projects, because that can really bring it to life. So if we can move on to the next slide. And this looks at the different phases. And one of the things that I think is really important to bring out from this evaluation is the benefits of long-term funding. Now, I know long-term funding is not necessarily a good thing, because people can sit back and think, oh, we can just get a bit complacent here. That was very much not the case with the Eden Project communities. They learnt and they grew and they changed, and they learnt and they grew and they changed. Every year they were adding and developing their offer to communities, and with incredible effects. So the early years was about increasing participation, fostering a sense of community, definitely adding into those individual benefits, to loneliness, to that sense of being joined up, having a sense of belonging. But then they added in broader regional representation and greater inclusivity. They realised that some communities find it easier to get together and organise these things than others. They really reached out to some of those communities that might find it harder to engage. And so there was much broader representation, and that's very evident from looking at all the reports and evaluations that were done along the way. And then looking at the later years, they're more nuanced in terms of the diversity and the inclusivity goals, with an emphasis on reaching vulnerable communities and promoting awareness of the funding that people could get for their local community. And that's where some of those numbers before link up. And you can see the significance. These are often communities where people would have thought, well, I don't know who to go to. How do you get something mended? We want our playground to operate well, or we want our old people to have somewhere, a lunch club to go to. These are the sorts of communities that found that route through the Big Lunch and through those community camps. So that's a huge win. And then in more recent years, making that much clearer link through to sustainability and environmental action goals. So moving on, we can see that the development over time has been phenomenal. And then we look at recommendations going forward. So these are reducing loneliness and improving a sense of well-being. There are an enormous number of examples of good work that can be learned from at the policy level and down to the community level. So huge gains. Read the detail in the report. I'm not going to give it to you now in my 5 minutes. Growing agency and community resilience. That means people feel like they've got a better sense of being able to make a difference. So feeding into that sense of, is my life significant? Well, yes. If you feel like you can make a difference, that's a huge motivation to feel, actually, I want to make this better, rather than some other sort of ambitions that might be less about the community around you and serving its needs. And then strengthening belonging and democratic renewal. So as Don mentioned, there are huge strains on our sense of trust in local councils to deliver, in local health services to deliver, in national government to deliver. Having these get-togethers and the way that the big lunch and the community programs can build connections, you can often find people have those links going not just once a year to organise the next event, but actually on a daily, even hourly basis. We've got one in our street. Too many messages sometimes, but it's about people sharing. There's less stuff thrown away. It's about, have you noticed there's a problem down there? We'll get it sorted out. So and so needs something. They can't get out the house this week. Huge benefits, and the big lunch has done an amazing job. So if you want the details, read the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you for saying such nice things. I wasn't expecting you to say all that. Really lovely to hear all that, and do read the report. There's the wonderful foreword by Dr. Abrams in there, and Professor Abrams. Sorry, I always get titles wrong. I apologise. And the executive summary is a light read, so don't worry that you're going to be deep in detail for too long. I'd also like to acknowledge that I know a few people are having problems with Teams, and so are we. It's glitchy today. I don't know if it's sort of Funky Friday or something, but we will share the recording out with everyone, and I think next time we'll try and go with back to good old Zoom, because I never have the same sort of challenges on Zoom. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce the lovely Helena from Bromley Council, who's going to, oh no, sorry, there's a film first. Thank you for getting to that, Kate. So there's a little film which is just going to summarise. It's a couple of years old, this film. But it will summarise with in a different way a little bit about the work that we have done over the years as Eden Project, Eden Project Communities, thanks to that funding from the National Lottery. So this would be a way for you to engage with that. That is a little bit more light entertainment. So sit back and enjoy, and then I'll introduce Helena. Thanks, Kate. I know some of you didn't get to see that. I think some of you saw it, some of you might not have done, but hopefully that will appear in the recording, or we can send a link out to that little summary film. And all of that work in that film was thanks to the funding from the lottery that we received. And much of that work we now continue with the Pears Foundation. So what will be really nice for you guys is to hear some real life examples of how the Big Lunch and some of the work we've done has appeared and been used by councils and in communities. So I'm going to hand over to Helena Jenkins, who is the Principal Loneliness Champion, and I think she said she's the only one in the country. So over to you, Helena, to talk a bit about what you do at Bromley Council.
Thank you so much. Yes, so I'm not just the only one in the country. I was the first one in the country. But now, since my 3 years of working within the borough, we have around 5 other loneliness champions across local authorities, and we have a local authority group specifically looking at loneliness across England, Ireland and Wales, which is very exciting. So I wanted to take you through within Bromley the work that we've been doing and why this is a real challenge. So the World Health Organization has recently done some research over the past 2 years. They've been working with people across the globe, the UN nations, and developed a really extensive report on loneliness on a global scale. And it states that 1 in 6 people are experiencing loneliness. The data suggests that roughly 1 million people pass away each year because of loneliness. We know that loneliness is really highly impacting our young youth population, and there are a number of different generic triggers as well as specialist areas where loneliness may be more prevalent within a certain person's life in a certain part of the world, and this should be on everybody's radar. And as a local authority, we are key to changing our hyperlocal communities, whether it be approving planning, supporting our voluntary sector through funding, approving programs for young people, thinking about our places, our spaces, and how we work with a myriad of different suppliers and key people like the NHS, our transport networks and others. Everything that we do all has a significant impact on the community, the culture and our belonging within where we specifically live. And loneliness is really important. There is a kind of new phrase coming out, and that is around our social health. How socially healthy are we? Those small interactions with people when you pay for your shopping, you might go into the bank, you might see somebody at your group, you might go to that big lunch. Those really small interactions each day are vital for us to be socially healthy because we are social creatures. And that is changing through our rapidly technological inventions all over the world and how we work. So from us looking at this from a local authority, we have a large stake within our local populations, but also we have a large amount of influence as well. And that's why we're trying to change that. And here are some of the solutions. When we talk about loneliness, we specifically talk about a person. If I am feeling loneliness, I should go and do something about it. However, we know from lots of research, loads more research is coming out now, but we know that loneliness is a system issue in terms it's not just that person, it's to lots of other things around us, and thinking around how we have the internal skills around us. Do we have the external resources around us to support us with these changes or challenges that we might be going through? Do we have a community around us? It could be community in the workplace, community within our streets, community centered around our faith, community centered around the things that bring us real joy, and also those big societal changes, so changes from national governments, changes which are going on across the world. They impact us in all sorts of different ways. And so the World Health Organization have put together a number of different areas and where we can do this. So engaging with people, campaigning around loneliness, like the Big Lunch, like Loneliness Awareness Week, policy change, and more research and interventions with a real academic view on what actually works. What can we do? How can we influence policy through some incredible data that can provide the right solutions for everybody? So what are we doing here at Bromley? So this is from a real local authority perspective, and for anybody else who might be working at a local authority. Bromley have been running big lunches within the borough for over a decade, and it's something which we support every single year. And we not only have council run big lunches, but we also go to support resident associations and individuals and other organisations to have their big lunches within their premises. So how do we do this? We have a number of council-run big lunches during the month of June through the month of community in key places within our borough to help bring people together on those days and find out about other services, support and other community groups which people can join and be part of. We also ensure that it's free and easy to close our roads. During that time, we also make sure that we waive our fees so that residential groups, organisations and individuals don't have to pay a fee to close their road. Supporting around community funding through our Innovation Fund programme, and also encouraging people to create their own big lunches, whether it be individually, whether it be in their organisations. We at the London Borough of Bromley, we have our own big lunch every single year as well. We feel it's really important to live by that value, which we're suggesting other people would as well, around taking ownership within their own communities. These are some pictures from our council run big lunches. We've had a number of different partners work with us, whether it be the Rotary clubs, whether it be our incredible spaces that we have within the borough, as well as different environmental groups, providing workshops and sessions and tailored walks to people across the borough. Oh, my picture's not come up. This was just a form to see where everything is, in that we've made a really easy communication which goes out through our local authority on our customer space for people to view with really quick, easy links. Oh, here we go. So you can see it's really clear in the title. It says exactly what it does in the tin, with a link to the form as well that individuals can use to close their roads really easily. So what can we as local authorities do to help support or enhance the big lunches we are already doing? So it could be that having vouchers for local retailers, so a previous partner being Iceland, could be really helpful for people to get the things that they need to have their big lunch. There could also be small funding pots or small schemes which can be used by a number of different ways to support this local feeling and belonging within the community, helping to support the culture within your borough to thrive on an individual basis, to increase their ownership. And we've already heard today the importance of that and this circular economy of being part of that to then give back elsewhere. And also we have some fantastic Friends of Parks groups, getting them involved as well as using their public spaces to host those big lunches as well. We try to communicate this in a multitude of different ways. So using the website is our favourite place to be able to promote these different big lunches, as well as those through individuals and our resident associations as well. Being able to see where your big lunch is or where others might be is really, really helpful. We've tried to have posters every year which go across the borough with a multitude of different people who are helping to promote this, not just on our platforms, but also many others as well. And then also thinking outside the box. We've used our big lunches as a way not to just have our lunch and engage with people, but to have a knowledge sharing session. So people are coming to our big lunch, but hopefully coming away with lots of other leaflets of how they can get involved, local support for them, but how they can also be part of this wider network of maybe finding their thing to help support this sense of a community, knowing where your people are, especially for preparing ourselves should anything change, building that network beforehand. So my top tips for other local authorities would be to promote the big lunch on social media, your press releases, everywhere you possibly can, with all the groups, especially our faith groups and your third sector. Making it really easy to close our roads is one of the best ways to be able to do this. Get organisations, our voluntary sector, get them all involved. Working in collaboration is really, really key to having some incredible events across the borough. Engaging with people about the big lunch, talking about the big lunch months and months before we even get to that point is really important. Reiterating the message, as well as the incredible belong data around why these are so important when it comes to everybody taking ownership and taking action within their own communities. And sometimes we need to think outside the box. box. It doesn't have to be a banquet. It could be where you come to your road and everybody has a cup of tea and a biscuit. Just getting to know people in that way is really, really important. This year we had 65 roads that were closed in Bromley, where individuals, residents associations wanted to be with each other. It was a full side in our newspaper just filled with all the road closures that would be happening, and it was an absolute pleasure to see that so many people wanted to do that. And so this number has been growing year on year, and it's fantastic to be part of this programme, because we here in Bromley completely understand the importance of the big lunch and what it brings to our community, our society, and how it really means that individuals are contributing to our tackling loneliness strategy here within our borough. So thank you so much for hearing from me.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Helena. That was amazing. And just really, really interesting to hear kind of how easy you seem to have made it for people to join in, lots of different ways where they can get information, and also presenting the idea to people in your local community, as well as hosting stuff centrally. So that was brilliant. Thank you. Now we're going to hear from oh, sorry, have I missed someone? Sorry. Now we're going to hear from the lovely Nadia, who's going to talk about her own experiences of running a big lunch. So over to you.
Hi everyone, thank you for that introduction, Lindsay. So I'm coming to you today from the Hearth Network. We're a relatively new CIC based in Southport, and we were founded in November of last year. Our big lunch was our second ever event that we hosted, and it's catapulted us to a new level of success. It's been fantastic. So to give a bit of background, a little bit about the Hearth Network and why we decided to do a big lunch, if we go on to the next slide, here's some pictures of our team. The Hearth Network was founded by myself and my mother. Often my daughter tags along, and we have two other directors who are also amazing women. But after the horrific attacks that happened last year, myself and my mum, we were really motivated to try and give back to our community in some way. We were looking around saying, we feel like we need to do something, but what can we offer to Southport? What skills do we have? I have 10 years experience in community engagement, usually under community cohesion, and my mother's background is in energy efficiency. And we were looking around, we looked at different statistics, the indices of deprivation, and we kind of recognised the fact that Southport is a town with a lot of disparity. You have pockets of extreme wealth, but in the middle of them is some of the most deprived areas in the country. When you look on the multiple indices of deprivation, we score in the top 10% in certain areas. So we were looking at this and saying, how can we try and balance things, try and bring some equality into this situation? And we realised that sustainability was that factor. When you're in a cost of living crisis, helping people reduce their energy usage, reduce how much they're spending on food, on clothing, means they've got more money left at the end of the month. So we set the goal of making Southport a greener place to live, work and visit. So if you go on to the next one, we saw a small pot of funding available for Big Lunch. We did a bit of research and we were like, yeah, we love to feed people, let's roll with this. But we're all about sustainability. So how can you make Big Lunch sustainable? We'll try and make it plastic free. And this was an immense goal for us to set ourselves so early on. But we were running around charity shops buying plates, cups, cutlery, serveware. On all of the advertisements, we were telling people to bring their own plates and cutlery with them. Restaurants donated food, community members brought food, there was a bake-off, there was live music from local musicians. It was an incredible day, especially when you factor in we only had 3 weeks to plan this. We fed over 140 people on about £800 budget. It was, I don't know how we did this. I look back and I'm like, this, it's amazing. But the real jewel in our crown was our bunting. So 7 days before our big lunch, we turned up into the Victorian Arcade where we held it. with sacks of fabric waste that was going to go to landfill from charity shops. And with 15 volunteers, we turned it into the most gorgeous handmade bunting, and we filled that arcade for the next week. So people were just loving the opportunity to come together and talk. And we heard so many people's stories where they were just looking for a way to feel like they can give back and do something positive in their community. And that image of turning one man's waste into another man's treasure really seems to have resonated with our the people that attend our events. So we're already planning for next year a bigger and better version of our Great Big Green Lunch. But if we go on to the next slide, you'll just see some of the press coverage. We made it into the local digital newspapers. We don't actually have a print newspaper in Southport anymore. And the social media coverage was immense. People loved it. We had tourists come down from Wales because they'd seen the posts online and they wanted to attend. It really did something positive in Southport. We raised £1,000 for the charities set up by two of the parents of the two of the girls that were killed last year. It brought together young people, old people. We know Southport is quite an aging town. We have an older population. But to see those older people sat next to Kurdish asylum seekers, Ukrainian refugees, members of the LGBT community, there were large groups of families from South Asia that had come on a day out to come and share food with us. It was just lovely to see people passing food across the table and talking to people and laughing and talking about the music. It really inspired us to get this ball rolling. So we've really kind of built our business plan a little bit around hosting big lunch. If we go on to the next slide for the future of our big lunches. So I'm going to thank Sefton Council. I know a few of their members are sat in here watching, particularly their visitor economy team. They're working really closely with us for next year's Great Big Green Lunch. So we hosted it in a Victorian arcade in town this year. For next year, it's Southport Market. It's a food hall. They've pedestrianised. You can see on the picture the artist's impression. So we are hosting our big lunch outdoors there. We're going to fill the whole street with bunting. So we are already making that. We do that once a month. But we're also looking to host a big heart lunch. I'm applying for funding for that in February, talking about heart health and bringing people together to eat heart healthy food and learn how to cook it and learn about ways to eat that. We're also looking at, for Refugee Week, can we do a big welcome lunch, trying to incorporate big lunch principles across all that we do, because serving food at all of our events is a key tenet of the Heart's belief. In those initial conversations that we had, we talked about women sitting together around a fire and sharing food and sharing stories, and how we can bring that back to our community, because we're a team that are led by women. We accept everybody, but we're an all-female team, and we really look at that kind of historical, kind of genetic feeling of women coming together to create change. And we really believe that the big lunch has helped us kind of shape that into Southport, and seeing people that have been through so much. There's not a person in our community who hasn't been directly or indirectly affected by the events of last year. To kind of come together and heal through community has been amazing. So yeah, that's our story. If you've got any questions, bob them out. I'm happy to answer. But thank you again for offering me the chance to speak at this webinar.
Fantastic. So lovely to hear your story, Nadia, and I'm sure it's touched lots of people, because I think it's the essence of what the Big Lunch is all about. And congratulations to you and everyone who worked on that event to bring it together, and in 3 weeks. So well done. Massive well done, and it looks fantastic, and I'm very much excited to see your next round of bunting. So yeah, brilliant to hear from both of you speakers, and I do have a question in the chat actually, so I'm going to open up the Q&A. If anybody has any questions for any of our speakers today, please drop them in the Q&A or pop them in the chat, and the team will feed them over to me. But I have got a question for you, Nadia, just as you were speaking there. How did you find people came together across points of difference? So you mentioned really different, diverse group of people there. How did you go about making sure the event kind of felt like it was for everybody? And how do you think people interacted during the day in terms of across those points of difference?
We were really lucky that there didn't seem to be any points of conflict on the day. I think because the way we advertised it, it was very much for the community, by the community. On all the imagery that we share, we make sure to use kind of inclusive language, inclusive images. Also, as a team of directors, obviously, I'm a person of the global majority, so that kind of makes I feel like it makes our events more accessible to people who might feel otherwise that maybe that's not an event for me. On the day, we had the Ukrainian Harmonia Choir perform, which is a choir made up of Ukrainian refugees. Um, it was really emotional.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, I've set
to
you off
have
now.
yeah to have kind of people, young people of all ages singing together really kind of set the vibe for the day.
Mm.
We have an amazing lady who has joined our community. She's a Kurdish asylum seeker, and she just loves our town. That's what it kind of comes down to. She came here on a day trip and just fell in love and resettled with her whole family. They were living a little bit further away. They've moved into Southport, and she just wants to share that love of our town with people. So she pushed a pram full of food from one end of town to the other to come to Big Lunch. She
Oh,
knitted a load of bunting herself. She wants to share her love and her passion for the town. And I think when you have people like that, you can't argue with them, because it's somebody that just wants to do good. And when you can showcase the good that people are doing, it's very hard to get angry and get upset by that. So we're really keen with everything that we do just to talk about the positive, like just highlight all the amazing things that are happening that just slip under the radar if nobody talks about them, because bad news always gets the headlines. You never get a positive headline. So let's make them ourselves and shout out about this wonderful lady that cooks for everybody and knits all her own postbox toppers, and let's share that story as a positive. And that's what Southport's all about. We want to be a town that welcome each other, that stand together against problems rather than just falling into division. We've been through enough of that, and that's what we were really keen to do. And I feel like that's what people took away from that. We had a large group of people attend from an addiction recovery service. So to see them interacting with the public, these are people that normally they get walked past on the street. People don't really talk to them, but to involve them and have them as active members of our community was lovely, and that's what we're really keen to promote. But I'm sure there's other questions for other people. I won't take all your time.
Thanks, Nadia. That's brilliant and brilliant to hear. And it kind of links to a question that's come in for you, Helena, just around the big lunch events across Bromley. Have they been successful in reaching some of these groups that maybe Nadia saw at hers, and groups that might be considered sort of harder to engage? So how, as a council, do you go about making that invite to everyone?
That's a really good question. So I think our community in Bromley is perhaps not as diverse as what Southport might be, but yes, these events are for everybody. So whether it be posters being translated to different languages, but also going to a myriad of different communities, whether it be going into our faith groups, going into our Bromley homeless communities, and going to support our refugees from Afghanistan and Ukraine is really important. And ensuring also that they're really accessible is key. So places where people can park closely, or there might be free parking, and ensuring that they're places where there's bus stops as well. Being in London means that we have the pleasure of having TfL transport, and our borough's quite well connected. However, there are places which are really geographically isolating. So ensuring that we have big lunches within those spaces, as well as our central hubs, is really key to ensure that our populations within individual towns feel that they have a belonging within that geographical sense, as well as our wider borough as well, is very key. We have an ageing population here within Bromley, and we have the most amount of care homes in London. So supporting our care homes to have those big lunches, to have those celebrations for not just the people that might live there, but also for their wider communities, really key to ensure that people feel that they're involved in the wider community still, even if they do live with other people who might be at a similar age, a similar demographic. civic, and that's really important. We engage lots with schools around what's going on, and the power of being with the local authority is that we can contact everybody if we want to, that resides here, that works with us, and a myriad of different communities. We have a very good relationship with our voluntary sector, and also provide a fund called the Innovation Fund, which supports organisations to innovate in a certain way, including the global majority groups that we work with, or initiatives which we might not directly utilise or actually power through the local authority. So it kind of how we do that. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And a kind of question for all, which you might want to come back on as well, Helena, just around the time it might take to build relationships. So you talked a bit about the sense of belonging and how important that is. You know, how much time do you find it takes to build the relationships across communities to gain the kind of trust and support for this kind of thing to take forward? And I'm sure Nadia and others might want to come in on that as well.
I think for that, I've been in my role for 3 years, and now the spark for other people saying we're going to do this because it's really important for loneliness is just starting. And so I've been doing a lot of work for 3 years in that. It takes a long time, but consistency is really key.
Fabulous, thank you. Jenny, we've also got a question for you about the research and kind of whether any results from the evaluation either differed from what you expected, or did you have any great surprises in the data when you started looking at it?
So I think there's 3 things come to mind. One is just how extensive Eden Project's communities work is. So I knew about the centre down in Cornwall and the fantastic focus on the environment, and that there's plans for more centres of that kind. But to find out the extensive outreach and the way that the team had really gone into communities that wouldn't necessarily think of doing something like the Big Lunch was a really good and important finding. So really effective, looking at socioeconomic deprivation, where they could have the maximum impact on addressing things like loneliness, but also that building up of community expertise, that sense of we can make a difference. We do have some agency in this place. We're not just powerless, and we don't have to go off to these extreme directions to feel like we're going to see any changes. There are people around who are making a difference day by day, and putting people in contact with those can really help break down those surprises. But also the value for money and the extensiveness of the programme, how far it's reached in terms of all the different regions, the 4 nations of the UK. It was really exciting to see just how much effort had been made to get into all 4 corners of the UK. So there's a few things.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, I'm hoping this whole call has helped uplift everybody. There's a couple more questions in the chat, and what we'll try and do, because we're tight on time now, is share those across with the speakers, and perhaps someone can come back. I'm conscious that people are having to move on to other meetings, but hopefully Professor Abrams, that's uplifted you a little bit with what's going on out there and giving you some food for thought for your social psychology and the work you're doing there. I'd like to thank you all for coming along today and spending time with us. And I can see a hand up, so I'll try and come to you there at the end. As a sort of final wrap up call to action, you can find out everything you need to know about the Big Lunch and sign up for a pack on our website. So go to thebiglunch.com or edenprojectcommunities.com and you'll find everything you need there. You'll also find our report there, and there is a link to that in the chat, the wonderful work that Jenny and her team did. And the Big Lunch next year will be back on an extended weekend so that it's even easier for businesses and schools and everyone to take part. So from the 5th to the 8th of June. So save the date, pop that in your diaries and help us spread the word. And if you'd like to have a meeting, and I'm saying this really, I'm going to do a mic drop because I'm going on holiday at the end of today. If you'd like to arrange a meeting, Tracy Robbins, who's on the call here, would be happy for you to be in touch. So trobbins@edenproject.com, and Tracy is our head of communities. So she'd love to help if you want to. When we send this deck out, which we will do with a link to the film, these are all links, so they will take you through to where you need to go. And I can see, is it James that's got his hand up? Is is it James? Are we able to hear James, or did he want to pop something in the chat? Or John? Maybe it's John Metcalf. I've got a JM and I was trying to work out who was who.
It would have to be through the chat.
Have to be through the chat, but
yes, so we can
thank you
follow
very
up.
much, everyone. And if you do have further questions, you can pop them in the chat. We'll try and follow up with answers for you. So brilliant. And I'd like to say thank you to all of our speakers today for taking time. Well done. It was really enthusing and inspiring to hear from you all and everything that you've been doing in your community. So thank you very much. And thank you everyone for coming along. Thanks, guys. It goes quiet. I should have music to finish off these.